Good morning, everybody. Not bad, not bad. By the end of the month, you guys will have it down pat for sure. So last week, we began our summer sermon series called Inside Out, where we're going to, of course, be examining emotions. Emotions, as we talked about last week, are not meaningless or random. They're part of how God designed us. Emotions are real, but they're not always reliable. If we let them lead us without being anchored to truth, they can take us to places that we were never meant to go. We don't ignore our emotions, we don't suppress them, but we also don't let them rule us. We bring them under Christ. That was our foundation from last week. That's going to be the foundation that we come back to each week as we look at these different emotions. This week, we're going to look at anger. And it's going to be a bit of a tough one. Don't fall into the trap of thinking, yeah, I know who needs to hear this message. Don't assume that your anger doesn't show up in your life. Today, as we start, let's begin with the assumption that your anger and my anger is a bigger issue in our lives than we might think. We might be surprised what we find. Anger is an emotion that wants results fast. Anger says that is wrong, whatever that is. It's a fundamentally moral emotion. When you're angry, what's happening inside you is that your heart is observing the scene before you and it's crying out that something you love is being treated unjustly. Anger sees what's happening and it passes judgment. Anger always passes judgment. Sometimes those judgments are right. Sometimes those judgments can be wrong. Some of us were taught that anger is always wrong. That if you're a Christian, you should always be calm, patient, and unshaken no matter what. But in James 1:19, we're cautioned to be slow in becoming angry. And Ephesians 4:26, for example, says, be angry and do not sin. It's kind of striking to me. Scripture doesn't say never be angry. The emphasis really comes down to what are you angry about and what are you going to do about it? Anger is a real emotion. We all feel it. It's okay to feel it, but it's not okay to be ruled by it. We need to bring this emotion under Christ. As we look at this emotion today, we're going to look at anger through three different lenses: righteous anger, misguided anger, and what I'm going to call sticky anger. And to do that, I want us to look at an instance when Jesus gets angry. And believe it or not, throughout Scripture, there's actually a number of instances of Jesus feeling angry. It's an emotion. We all feel it. Jesus was fully human, so he experienced it and felt it too. But of course, Jesus is going to provide the example for us on how we should respond to it. Now we're going to turn to John chapter 2, verses 13 to 17. This is the account of Jesus clearing or cleansing the temple courts. This story appears in all four of the Gospels, though the Gospel of John places this event at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, while the others, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, place it at the end. Some people believe that this is two instances where Jesus begins his ministry by clearing the temple and then does it a second time at the end of his ministry. Others think that this is one event just told with different emphasis. For our purposes today, we don't need to get sidetracked by whether this is one event or two events. What's important is that every gospel writer tells this story because this moment matters. So we're going to turn again to John 2, 13 to 17. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a market." His disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." Jesus is angry. What exactly is Jesus angry about? Is it a righteous anger or is it misguided? Well, he's angry because these people have turned his Father's house, the temple, into a market. And market is not a strong enough word. They've turned the temple courts into a circus. They've turned it into a scam. They've turned it into a den of robbers. Here's what was happening, okay? Passover was the biggest, most important Jewish celebration. It celebrates and remembers the Jewish people being delivered out of Egypt. Now, if you were a male and Jewish and you lived within about 15 miles, it was a requirement. You had to be in Jerusalem at the temple for Passover. It wasn't a biblical mandate, it just became one of their rules and regulations, right? Now, if you lived further away than 15 miles, you would still want to be at the temple in Jerusalem for Passover. You would do everything that you could to get there. If you lived really, really far away, it would be your goal, maybe your life's dream, to get to Jerusalem, to the temple, for just one Passover. This is a big deal. The city is packed. And Jesus goes to the temple and he sees people selling, or the sellers. This is a case where it's actually important to recognize that in the original Greek, the point here is that this is an identifiable group of people. Jesus sees the sellers, this group that were well known in Jerusalem, and here's how it would work. You need a lamb for Passover. Lambs are going to be slaughtered and presented as a sacrifice and eaten as part of the covenant meal. And you might need some other animals too, maybe a dove or cattle for other various offerings. But if you're coming from far away, you're not going to bring that with you, right? You'll just buy one when you get there. How convenient, because the sellers at the temple have them available for you to purchase. But hold on, because your foreign money is no good at the temple. You need to exchange it first. No problem. The temple has foreign exchange. But it was a ripoff. Just to exchange your money, it would cost you more than a day's wages. But it went even further. Maybe you lived close enough, or you've gone through this before and you decide, I'm not going to deal with that nonsense. I'm going to bring my own animal this time. Hold on a second. Because if you want to use your own animal, the temple inspectors need to inspect your animal to make sure that it was clean. It had to live up to their exact specifications and regulations if you wanted to sacrifice it. And guess what would happen most of the time? Sorry, see that little microscopic issue? Can't use that animal. But lucky for you, you can buy one from us. People were coming to the temple to worship God with sincere and pure hearts, and they were being taken advantage of. They were being ripped off. That's what makes Jesus angry. Jesus is angry because people aren't allowed to worship without this nonsense. This is a righteous anger. Jesus' anger is not self-centered. It's not rooted in pride or insecurity. This is a righteous anger. This anger starts with God. Recall what we read just a little earlier, right, from Jeremiah chapter 7? There it's talking about worthless religion, where there's oppression, there's mistreatment of foreigners, widows, and orphans. There's lots of stealing and murdering, all sorts of things going on. Then we get to verse 10. It talks about all of these detestable things that you're doing, and then you come out and stand before me in this house, which bears my name, and say, we're safe? Safe to do all these detestable things? Has this house, which bears my name, become a den of robbers to you? But I have been watching, declares the Lord. Jesus has a righteous anger. He's angry about what makes God angry. Jesus has great zeal, enthusiasm, or passion for his Father's house, and it's been turned into a charade. We read in Romans chapter 12, verse 9, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Righteous anger against evil is part of sincere love. There is such a thing as good anger, righteous anger. And righteous anger communicates protective love for what God loves, because it delights deeply in the relationships, people, and structures of justice. Righteous anger targets anything that would divide us from God or one another. Righteous anger targets anything that would destroy what is right, lovely, and fruitful. Jesus demonstrates to us that there is such a thing as righteous anger. But then on the other side of things, there's misguided anger, which is the complete opposite. Misguided anger is self-centered. Often it's rooted in our own pride or insecurity. Misguided anger is reactive and uncontrolled, and misguided anger usually seeks to harm or to vent. At its worst, misguided anger conveys unadulterated self-interest and issues an ultimatum. You obey my law or you suffer my wrath. Misguided anger still tries to seize the moral high ground. It makes a judgment, but its high ground is manufactured by my own preferences. Even sometimes if our anger is directed to some real injustice, it's often because I don't like it, and I would feel better if there was vengeance. Make no mistake about it, anger is a very strong emotion. It offers the experience to play God by being lawgiver, judge, and jury, by ordering the world according to what I like. Misguided, ugly anger is utterly arrogant. We all experience this emotion from time to time, and when we feel it, we need to discern, is it righteous anger or is it misguided? So when you're feeling angry, here's what I want you to do. Try to pause for a moment and ask yourself, why am I angry? And you might think that's kind of silly or simple, but it will really help you discern if what you're feeling is righteous or misguided. And often you can diffuse misguided anger simply by verbalizing your answer to the question, why am I angry? And often when we realize the petty source of our anger, that fire of judgment that's built up inside, quickly sputters and dies out. A week ago Friday, I'm with the girls in the afternoon, and I need to check a few things quickly on my phone on the computer before we're going to head out to the Cookie Nook to get some dessert for after dinner. All is great. But I check my phone, I do the emails I need to do, and then I get a hockey-related alert. It's bad news. It's very bad news. Specifically, it's very bad news for the Anaheim Ducks, and it's likely going to be very bad news for the entire NHL. There's going to be a lockout. I'm angry about this news. I am really upset as I am scrolling through my phone looking for more details. I'm angry. We head out to the Cookie Nook. The Cookie Nook. How can you be grumpy when you're going to the Cookie Nook? I was in an awful mood. And then, as it always happens like this, you get put in an opportunity where you have to practice what you preach. So I said to myself, why am I angry? I'm angry because a professional hockey player that I have never met has signed an expensive offer sheet for a team that I don't cheer for. Yeah, that's misguided anger, isn't it? That's not anything like the emotion that Jesus was experiencing in the temple. Often, our anger is misguided. And honestly, it's usually over silly stuff like that. I'm angry because at the drive-thru, the coffee lid wasn't tight enough and I spilled a little on my hand. I'm angry because the person in front of me is driving a little bit slower and I'm going to be 2 minutes late. I'm angry because the line at the grocery store is longer than I wanted it to be. I'm angry because the Wi-Fi is slow and this page won't load. I'm angry because I made plans in my own head and they're not happening the way that I thought. When you actually say it out loud, when you hear it, you start to realize that's not righteous anger. That's misguided. That's all about me. And often just naming it is enough to take the heat out of it. The fire starts to sputter and die down. It might seem simple, but the next time you're feeling angry, give it a try and ask, why am I angry? Jesus' anger here is a righteous anger. It's rooted in the holiness of God, the protection of true worship, and the defense of people who are being oppressed. So, how does Jesus deal with it? You're angry? Okay. The next question, what am I going to do about it? Righteous anger isn't reactionary. It's not driven by impulse. Our response needs to be deliberate, not reactionary. And that's what we see here from Jesus. Jesus does not lose control. It says in verse 15 that he made a whip out of cords. This is an important detail. He is deliberate. He takes the time to fashion a whip out of materials that would have been readily available, cords, rope, maybe some vegetation. His response is not reactionary. He's deliberate in how he's going to respond in his anger. Jesus is then forceful, not foolish. For me, particularly when I was a little bit younger and I would read this story, I always pictured Jesus with like an Indiana Jones style whip, like whipping people and like getting them out of there. But that's not what this is. It's not a weapon. You just simply can't drive these animals out by being passive and timid. Years ago, when I lived in Orangeville, I was working at the church there, and we had done an outreach event that included petting zoo. The event comes to an end, and we're tearing down and cleaning things up, and the young folks that were running the petting zoo for the farm, one of their cows got out and was running around the parking lot, eating the bushes and shrubs that were planted around the church. And so we're trying to get this cow back in. Come on, Bessie, come along now. Come on in the trailer. Here's a carrot for you. Come on, come on. Cow's not listening at all. We're chasing this stupid cow around for 20 minutes. One of the old farmer's wives comes out, sweet and tiny lady. She knows that you can't be timid with moving these big animals. She walks right up to old Bessie, grabs that cow's tail, yanks it, and walks it right onto the trailer. Simple. Forceful but not foolish. Jesus isn't timid with the animals here. He's being forceful. He's not being foolish. The purpose of the whip is to remove the animals that won't move otherwise. His action is decisive and effective. Jesus' response here is forceful, not foolish. Jesus then turns his attention to the money changers, and his response is disruptive, not destructive. He pours out their money, he flips their tables over, but he doesn't harm the people. He doesn't take their money, he doesn't take any of their stuff. He disrupts what is wrong. And then with the dove sellers, it's a strong verbal command. He's commanding, he's not chaotic. Ultimately, his response to this scene in the temple courts is about restoration, not destruction. Jesus is cleansing the temple. Jesus is restoring what is God's. When Jesus gets angry, his response to that anger is about restoration. Jesus is solving a problem without becoming a problem himself. There is no collateral damage. There's no spillover where his response causes further harm or damage. His response is restoration, not destruction. What did he see? He saw exploitation. That makes Jesus angry. How did he respond? Restoration. He clears the temple to restore it to its purpose. It's not to vent, it's not to punish, it's to restore. We all feel angry once in a while. Ask yourself, why am I angry? If it's misguided, then let it go. If it's righteous, then your response needs to be about restoration. Stop and ask, what's the wise response here? Is my anger serving a good outcome? Is there restoration? Or is my response going to end up spilling over and hurting me and others? It's okay to feel angry. It's about understanding why you're angry and what you're going to do about it. The trouble is, as Jesus demonstrates, there is righteous anger. And I'm sure we've all experienced that silly anger, that misguided anger, right? We get upset over minor things. Where things get really sticky, really fast, is sometimes we encounter situations that make us feel angry or upset, and it's not silly. It's legitimate. But it's also not something that we would say is a righteous anger either. But we can't just ignore it and let it go. It's a sticky anger. That's where pausing and really asking that question, okay, I'm angry. It's a real thing. What am I going to do about it? My response and your response needs to be deliberate, not reactionary. Your response needs to be wise. Don't become a problem. In your anger, don't sin. But react in such a way that restores and solves the problem. You can be right about the wrong, but then you can be wrong in how you respond. Let me give you an example, and I realize I have no shortage of examples of me getting angry. This is something that happened a few years ago. So my girls were younger and smaller then. We're out in the backyard, and we discovered these little white mushrooms all over the yard. It's weird. Turns out they're not mushrooms. They're actually BBs or pellets from an airsoft rifle. One of the homes that backs onto our yard had some students living in it, and they would often have some gatherings, shall we say, and we assumed that it was probably them shooting their rifle into our yard. Initially, we let it go, but the pellets kept appearing more and more often, and over the weeks, we could actually see this particular neighbor with their airsoft rifle out on their porch a number of times. And one day, Sarah and I are in the yard with the girls, and we discover this giant mess of these BBs. And it was evident that they were shooting into our yard. This was about after Thanksgiving. So we had moved our pumpkins that sat in the front yard as decoration, and they're now by the compost bin. These neighbors are shooting at our pumpkins for target practice. We also have a bird feeder in our Manitoba maple over there. They were shooting at the bird feeder. This is not a one-off. This is recurring incidents, and they're intentionally using our stuff in our yard as target practice. Oh, I can feel it. And we're picking up these pellets. We got a whole little sandwich bag full of these pellets, and I announced to Sarah, "That's it. I'm going over there." I'm angry. I'm upset, and I ask myself, okay, well, what are we doing here? Why are we so angry? Well, these guys are disrespecting our property. It's very unsafe, even just having these little BBs around. My girls are at the age where they're putting everything in their mouth, and let alone what if my girls are out there or my cat when they're shooting into our yard? This is very unsafe. This is a legitimate thing to be angry about. This isn't hockey news. This isn't minor, silly inconvenience. This is legitimate. I'm right about the wrong. But I still need to be wise in how I'm going to respond. And I would love to tell you that I just skipped over there with a big smile on my face because I figured out anger, and this is really easy. But listen, you know this about me, but let me just remind you. Don't put anybody on a pedestal, whether it's folks you see up here on our platform, somebody you watch on TV or read their books. We all miss the mark. We all mess up, okay? I'm going to be honest with you here. The initial thoughts in my head was not a wise response. That's just how anger works. That's why you got to slow down and ask yourself these questions. I wanted to go over there and tear a strip off of this guy. I bet most of you would probably be feeling the same way, wouldn't you? I'll be very honest, to my detriment here. And how do I say this nicely? Tiny part, just a flash, just for a moment that went through my mind that thought, you've made an unsafe environment for my little girls. I will have no problem making an unsafe environment for you. Would that have been a wise response? No. I had to slow down and ask myself, okay, what are we going to do here, Josh? What's the outcome of this anger going to be? Is my response going to make things better? Is it going to help fix what's wrong? Or is it going to build something, or is it going to break something? Is my response going to be about destruction and punishment, or am I seeking to solve a problem and bring restoration to a broken situation? Because even when anger is justified, it can still be mishandled. Why am I angry? What am I going to do about it? And so I go over there, and one of the fellas is getting into his pickup truck. And I introduce myself, and we have a very pleasant conversation. Seriously, we do. And I framed it like this. They don't live there anymore. I forget the guy's name. But I said, listen, I really need your help with something. I explained what was going on. I showed him the sandwich bag of BBs, and I said that I needed his help to get it to stop. No arguments, no raised voices, no threats of any kind. A neighborly conversation. I need your help in solving this issue. And it was solved. And I walked back thinking, that's a sermon illustration. I should remember that, as I'm going to use that one day. You have found yourself in situations where your anger is a fair and reasonable emotion. You get passed over for the promotion that you deserved. A coworker takes credit for the work that you did. The boss treats you unfairly. You can be right about the wrong, but if you explode, if you gossip, if you retaliate, you just make the situation worse. You need to be wise in how you respond. Your flight gets canceled and you're stranded somewhere. Your kid gets busted for shoplifting, or you catch them in a big lie. You get way overcharged or treated unfairly at the car shop or by the contractor or while you're out to eat. Or your spouse forgets something that is incredibly important to you. Emotions are part of life. But see, most of the problem isn't your anger. Anger is an emotion. It's something that God gave us. The real problem is what your anger turns into. Because most of the damage that is done in your life won't come from your circumstances. It comes from how you respond to them. Becoming someone who destroys instead of restores, that's the problem. But Jesus shows us a better way. You are going to feel angry. So when you do, pause and ask, why am I angry? And then ask, what am I going to do about it? And in that moment, be like Jesus. Be wise, not reactionary. Be deliberate, not impulsive. You can be forceful, just don't be foolish. And make sure that your response is aimed at restoration and not destruction. Be right in how you handle the wrong. And with that, I'll invite our worship team to come forward and close our time.